Hello! A few months ago now, my booktube bestie, Joana Sousa, whose channel will be linked down below, and I decided to do a little TBR swap challenge, and we intended to vlog the experience originally, and I think Joanna did do that, but I ended up wanting to do just a wrap-up version. I just at the time wasn't really feeling it with the vlogging thing, so we've got a wrap-up version. So basically what this was is we sent each other pictures of our physical TBR and we picked books for each other from each other's physical TBRs and read them and shared our thoughts as we were going along and shared them with you. That's what this video is. So I'm going to show you first of all the books that Joanna picked for me. She actually sent me a long list and let me pick from them, and I did the same for her, but we were originally supposed to pick 3 books each for this and I couldn't narrow it down to 3, so I actually ended up picking 4 and then actually ended up reading 6, which is just me in a nutshell, to be honest, but there it is. So the first one is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, then The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft, and From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. And I have also, on top of reading those 4, read the entire Farseer trilogy now, so I've also read Royal Assassin and Assassin's Quest. So since I've read the whole trilogy, I thought that I would mention the whole trilogy here, but this is really just a wrap up for Assassin's Apprentice, kind of. But I'm going to talk about them in mostly the order that I read them. The first one I read was From Blood and Ash. I should mention as well that I listened to the audiobooks for all of these and immersion read most of them. Sometimes I needed to just listen to the audiobook for various reasons, but most of the time I immersion read these. And this one is a super popular, recently especially, fantasy romance that kind of has paranormal vibes as well. This is very light and fluffy, even though it's adult, and some of the scenes aren't light and fluffy because there's a war going on and all that kind of thing. It just, in tone and in theme in general, is light and fluffy, so that made it a quick and easy read for me. I do really enjoy paranormal romance in particular, and this kind of felt quite similar to paranormal romance, even though it's more fantasy rather than paranormal. Kind of. This whole video is spoiler free, by the way. So I enjoyed the characters in here. I did find the story somewhat predictable in places, but that's not necessarily surprising or a problem given the type of book that this is, and I do definitely want to continue with the series. I haven't yet, mostly because I don't have the other books yet, and the reason I don't have the other books yet is because I did a bad thing and I ordered the fancy Fairy Loot hardback editions, which are not going to arrive here for a little while, so I haven't carried on with the series. I am a little bit apprehensive about carrying on because I've heard kind of average things about book 1 and pretty negative things about book 2, but I feel like this book and this series in general is the kind of thing I want to have on hand to read when I want to read an adult fantasy with some romance that isn't a chore. Not that any reading is a chore, but you know what I mean. There are some books that are quite heavy to read, and there are some books that are quite light and easy to read, and I'm not always necessarily in the mood for something that's YA or something that's middle grade and that it's light because of that. I want something light but that it is also adult, you know? So I feel like this is perfect for that. I also feel like I'm incredibly incoherent, so I apologise. The next one that I read was Senlin Ascent by Josiah Bancroft, which, oh, I didn't tell you what this is about. I feel like you probably know what this is about. It follows Poppy, who is a chosen, and basically that means she has to stay pure. No one's allowed to see her face. She's not allowed to touch people, particularly men, and all that kind of thing. She has to stay pure. But she doesn't want to. She wants to fight, and she wants to have relationships, and you see where it's going. This one follows Senlin, who has got married before the beginning of this book, and he is going on his honeymoon to the Tower of Babel with his wife Maria. And when they arrive, they get separated, and basically the whole series, I think the 4th book is about to come out, and I think the 4th book is the final book, is about to come out maybe in October, possibly November, can't remember. And the whole story is about him looking for his wife in the Tower of Babel, which is just this place that is quite strange, and there's weird politics going on, and it's kind of like a fun fair but darker, and each level is very different. It's a really, really interesting setting, but also really quite difficult to explain. The book does a great job, but I don't think I can explain it properly. I enjoyed this, but there's something about it that feels so familiar, and I just can't put my finger on what it is, which is really annoying. But I still enjoyed the book nevertheless, but there is just this niggling thing in the back of my head that is like, this reminds me of something, what is it? I can't figure it out. It kind of has that sort of 80s, 90s fantasy film vibe, so it gives me kind of vibes of The Labyrinth and Dark Crystal and Willow and all of that kind of vibe, like almost campy but epic fantasy, The Time Bandits, that kind of thing. If you've seen any of those films, hopefully you know what I mean, that there's just this vibe about them, and I get that vibe from this book, which I like. Because, you know, I grew up watching those kinds of films, so it's almost nostalgic in a way, particularly because, again, I feel like there's something that this reminds me of that I can't figure out what it is, but I do like it. I think that Senlin is a really interesting character because he's not your quintessential hero. He's not particularly heroic. He makes so many bad decisions, and you're just sat there going, Senlin, why though? Why are you doing this? Clearly that is not going to work. And that's kind of the point. Whereas Maria, his wife, struck me for the very short portion that we saw her right at the beginning of the story as really quite a practical and intelligent person in that way. And Senlin's very intelligent, but not in a street smart type of way, you know? So I think we maybe get some of Maria's perspective in future books. I don't know if I'm making that up, but I feel like I've heard that, and I'm really looking forward to that actually, because I think that it will be a really interesting contrast between the way that she deals with things and the way that Senlin deals with things, and I'm really interested to continue to learn about the tower and the different levels and how things work, and to continue to feel that feeling that I can't really explain properly. The next one I read was Assassin's Apprentice, but I'm actually going to talk about this one last because I'll talk about it and then talk about the series in general. So the next one I'm going to talk about, which was actually the last one of the original 4 that I read, is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. And this one is adult too. I think all of these are adult actually, which is pretty typical because I think that Joanna mostly reads adult, and I'm kind of moving in that direction now as well. I might do a video about that at some point, we'll see. Anyway, this one follows Rin, who is I feel like so much happens in this book, I have to be careful about what I say, but basically Rin has been adopted by this couple who sell opium. And a lot of this story is inspired by the Opium Wars, and so it's set in a time where opium was quite prevalent, and it's not set in China, but it's basically set in China. It's even geographically, it's pretty close to, well, I mean, if I show you the map, you'll see what I mean. So you can see, I mean, obviously China doesn't necessarily do that, but it's pretty obviously China, and again inspired by the Opium Wars. And so Rin, it works in a shop, but it's basically a front for an opium den, and she, right at the beginning of the story in chapter 1, so not a spoiler, this family wants to sell her off and marry her off to somebody for various reasons that I won't get into, and she doesn't want to do that. So she wants to sit this exam to get herself into a really prestigious school for warriors, and the story goes from there. You've probably heard this said before, this story is very dark. It is. That doesn't really bother me. I'm not particularly squeamish. I don't really get triggered by things very often, apart from in-depth internal anxiety spirals. That's really the only thing I found that triggers me. So I wasn't triggered by anything in this, but I can see how a lot of people would be, so be cautious about that. I found the story just so absorbing. I was really hooked by it basically straight away. I actually started reading it and then had to pause because of an audiobook expiring, a library loan of an audiobook expiring on another book, so I wanted to read that one first, and as it happens I didn't finish that one in time anyway, and then it took me a few weeks to come back to it, but I feel like it was sitting in the back of my mind going that I wanted to get back to it because I'd really enjoyed the 2 chapters of it that I had read, and I was so glad when I went back to it because I just flew through this one so quickly. Rin is such an interesting character because she is our protagonist, she's the heroine of our story, but she doesn't make heroic decisions, and they're not necessarily bad decisions, as in they're not decisions that are tactically bad, but they are morally bad, you know? She makes choices that I would not make, that the vast majority of people would not make, and even the majority of characters in this book would not make. But she feels forced to make the decisions that she does by the circumstances that she finds herself in, by the upbringing that she has had, by all of the experiences that she's gone through as a result of that upbringing. So it's really, really interesting, and you can see why she does all the things that she does, but you can't root for them because they're awful and the situations she's in are awful. It's really quite a fascinating read from a character analysis perspective, and I really enjoyed that because I'm a character driven reader, so that kind of thing I find really enjoyable. I feel like this book might possibly, or almost certainly, is considered within the grimdark fantasy genre. I might be wrong about that, but it certainly feels like it should be if it isn't, given the content and the themes and all that kind of thing. I've seen this shelved in young adult before, by the way. This is not a young adult book, this is definitely an adult book, so I'm just putting that out there in case there are any YA watchers. I'm not saying don't read it, I'm just saying be aware that it's not a YA book, it's an adult book, it's heavy and it's dark, and I really enjoyed it, and I don't think I've ever read a grimdark book before this, or at least not to my knowledge. If you know that I have, feel free to let me know, but I don't think I have, and I really enjoyed this, and I didn't think that grimdark would be my thing, and I still am dubious about it being my thing in general, but this one I really enjoyed. And then the last book or books that I'm going to talk about is Assassin's Apprentice and the Farseer trilogy in general. Assassin's Apprentice was the book that I read for this particular TBR swap, but I liked it a lot, so I ended up reading the rest of the trilogy. This one, I was in a live show, so Royal Assassin Book 2, I was in a live show on Beautifully Bookish Bethany's channel with Bethany, of course, and Laura from A Book Circus, and then this one I'm going to be in a live show tonight when you're watching this. It's going to be on Friday night, 1:30 AM UK time. So if you want in-depth spoilery thoughts about this one, then tune into that live show, and if you want them about this one, then you can go and watch that one. This one I haven't wrapped up properly on my channel yet because I was saving that for this video. This follows Fitz, who is the bastard son of Prince Chivalry, who is the heir to the Farseer throne. And at the beginning of the book, he is basically delivered up to his father's castle. He's never met his father, he can't remember his mother, and he's just kind of dumped on their doorstep. And we follow him, I think he was 6 when that happened. We kind of follow him from that point throughout the trilogy. By the end of this trilogy, he's probably in his early 20s. I'm not actually sure, I don't think it's confirmed specifically. Well, actually, at the very end, anyway, it's not the point. So he's quite young, basically, is the point in this one, but it's still an adult book, even though the protagonist is at first a child and then a teenager. The book is still an adult book in terms of tone and writing style, that kind of thing. And lots of people complain about this being slow and boring. And I suppose it kind of is slow, and I can see why people would think it is boring. But I didn't think it was. I really enjoyed it. I liked Fitz. I enjoyed watching him grow up. I enjoyed him trying to learn how to use magic and how to assassinate people and deal with all of the family dynamics that he's experiencing and deal with all of the politics that are going on. I enjoyed all of it, and I suppose not a huge amount happens in this one. There are some training montages, I suppose, and there's some political intrigue happening, but plot-wise it's not heavy on plot. And I think what I'm discovering this year especially is that I don't need there to be a lot of action, I don't need there to be a lot of plot, I don't really need much to happen as long as I like the characters. And I do like Fitz. I particularly like the Fool. The Fool is my favourite character in this trilogy. I also like Verity, and I also like Patience and Ketrican and many other characters that I don't want to get into in case of spoilers, but I really enjoy the characters in this. I also really desperately hate, with a burning passion, Regal. Just so much. I hate him a lot, and I like that. You know, I feel like there aren't enough books where the villain is truly detestable. Like, there really just aren't. Quite often you have this big bad and you're like, yeah, they're awful, fine, whatever. And they're this like looming threat that you don't really see very often, and therefore it's not a bother. But Regal is always just there, stuffing things up all the time, and it just, oh, I hate Regal just so much. And I like that about this book and this trilogy. It's enjoyable. I really loved this one too. And although I've heard that this one is slow and meandering, I didn't find that personally. I mean, it is. I'm not going to disagree with that. It is slow and meandering, but my point is that it didn't bother me. And I liked it. And it hurt me. And I'm so incoherent in this video. These 3 books are all the kinds of books that, you know, when you get to the end of the book and you kind of just sit there staring off into space, not really sure what to do with yourself because it's over. That's what each book in this trilogy gave me, and this one gave me that on steroids. So this was fantastic. I'm going to be starting the Mounship Traitors series in September, which is next month, when I'm filming this and when you're seeing this, and I'm really looking forward to that. I'm reading Ship of Magic with Joanna, funnily enough, and I'm excited, and I'm really glad I started reading The Realm of the Elderlings. I really like Hobbs' writing. It's really well written. It's not purple at all. You hear people say that Hobbs' writing is fantastic, and it is, but it's not kind of purple. It's just really well written. The same was true for this one and this one. This one isn't amazingly well written. It was fine, you know, I liked it anyway, but these are just really well written as well. And this whole TBR swap thing was a huge success. Maybe I should get Joanna to pick what I read more often, because I loved basically all of these. Should I rank them? I feel like that would be fun, but also quite hard. And I'm not going to rank these separately. I'll just include these as one. So I do feel like that's a little bit unfair though. So let me actually take these 2 out. And I'm just going to go ahead and rank these original 4. So number 4 is definitely going to be From Blood and Ash. I really enjoyed it. I mean, this is like ranking favourites in order of favourite, you know, so I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call this one a favourite, but I did really enjoy it. But this one will be at the bottom, number 4. Then I think Senlin Ascends. Again, really enjoyed it, but not as much as the other 2. And then this is where it gets tricky, and this is why I took out the other 2, because if I'm ranking them just based on this first book, then it's probably Assassin's Apprentice next, followed by the Poppy War. But if I were to include the whole trilogy, this would go the other way around, and it would be Poppy War followed by Assassin's Apprentice, or the Farseer trilogy in general. So really, really good though. I mean, I don't rate books anymore, but these are all fantastic. I really enjoyed this TBR swap. I hope that you enjoyed this kind of rambly, incoherent video. And yeah, basically the moral of this story is that I should get Joanna to pick my TBR more often, because clearly it works for me. Don't forget to check out Ponderful Books down in the description, and that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like this from me, then do think about hitting that subscribe button, and I hope to see you here again soon. Thanks!